Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply. We've got a skillet. We need a skillet handle cover. Now, we could absolutely turn this into a work of art, or let's get a feel for the pattern and make a really pretty skillet handle cover that's going to look good in our kitchen or at our campsite. All right, so anything I use in this video, weaverleathersupply.com, or check below. We've got links there. Going to take you straight to the website. But also, if you want to know when our videos release, just click your notifications. You'll know exactly when these come out. So let's step over to our pattern table, look at an easy way to make a pattern. We're not going to worry about a digital pick on this pattern. Super easy pattern to make, but at the same time, our skillet handles, these can vary greatly, both with width, length, and thickness. So the easiest thing to do here, let's take some poster board. I'm going to take my skillet, flip it over, get it as flat as I can, and then let's do our best to trace that out. Then let's find our center line, score that. Now we can bend that over. Any cut we make is going to be perfectly symmetrical, but there's a couple of things we need to think about. Well, first off, I would love a form-fitting handle cover. The problem is this piece has got to be wide enough to go around this width and thickness. So we're going to come out 3/8 of an inch there. Easy way to do that. Let's go with our quick release wing divider. That's the 4-inch. Set that at 3/8 of an inch, and let's just scribe a line out. We cut it, and it's going to be perfectly symmetrical when we open that up. But also, too, this is my camp skillet. Well seasoned, absolutely. But I'm not going to leave my handle cover on this while it's on the fire. So I need this to slide on and off very easily. But also, we're going to make one cool addition. So right here, I've got my two pieces of my pattern. That's our top, and then we're going to cut a second. This is our bottom. Well, right there, I've added a little bit extra tab. Well, I'm thinking this is on the campfire or even on our stove. I don't want to leave our handle cover on the skillet while it's on the fire. So, again, needs to slide on and off easily. But right here, I'm notorious. On the heavy skillets, it's full of something. I tend to want to grab this right here because that gives me a little more leverage. My finger burns my finger. So how about we extend our bottom piece just a little bit. So now when that's on, I can grab my skillet right there. I'm not going to burn my finger. Well, all of this, easy enough. Let's step over to our pattern table. Let's cut some leather. I think the hardest part of this project for me is simply picking the leather. We've got so many beautiful, perfect options. Well, now, if we're thinking campsite, my first thought, our 4 to 5 ounce Crazy Horse Water Buffalo, that is so rustic. That would look good. But at the same time, if we have a rustic kitchen, lodge, cabin, great way to go. But how about this? We're leather crafters. Let's add a little class to our campsite. Let's go with our Western Crunch. 9 beautiful colors here and a very affordable leather for us crafters. But also, not just for the campsite, for the kitchen, we've got so many beautiful colors here. We could match the colors in our kitchen. That would look good. All right, so I'm going to reset here. I'm going to pick one of these beautiful colors. Let's start cutting. Let's go with our tan. Well, first off, it's a beautiful color. But for me, the dark greens, dark blues, love them. Those would look good in a kitchen, but at a campsite, I'm probably going to lose those. Let's don't do that. Let's go with our tan. Now, this scribes nicely. It's very easy to see. The problem, though, is that we've got a top coat on this, so it's a little bit slick with our pattern. So when we scribe this, let's do our best to hold that down as tight as we can. Good, we've got that, and we can easily see our pattern. So as always, new blade or sharp blade, it's a little bit soft. I want to get a good cut on this, so let's do our best to hit our scribed line. Good, we've got that, and I bet those are going to fit together nicely. That scribed line is so easy to see. I think I actually did split it. All right, so let's step over to our pattern table. Get this ready to sew together. We've actually got a nice meat from our pattern. Now what we could do, we could overcut the top or the bottom, take the other piece, cut it to size, tape it on, and then cut the second piece to size. Makes everything very easy, but we've got a good pattern to trace and cut from, so we're going to go with this just like it is. Now we're going to tack these two pieces together. A good rule of thumb in leathercraft: if we're going to tack for permanent, let's go with the S18, the contact cement. But if we just need to tack to sew, the white glue works great. But in this situation, I don't want my glue too far in from the edge, because that could keep this from wanting to go on our handle, or it could stick on our handle on our skillet. So let's use our double-sided tape. This is the 3/32 inch. It's the smaller, but it works great. Now, before we do that, let's add a little edge work here. We're going to use our scribe, or our wing divider, to scribe in our line for our stitch line. But down here on the end, let's use our groover. Now, this leather, it's a little tough to groove, so let's go easy on this. Yeah, there we go. That makes a nice edge. I'm going to do the same thing here. Good, there we go. Not necessary, but that's going to be a nice little detail. So now, let's add our tape to this piece, since that's going to lay on top right there. Let's add tape to this piece. Now we don't have to hit this all the way around. Again, we're just going to tack this long enough to get a stitch line in it. And let's just get right to that edge, just so that doesn't move around on us when we're adding our chisel line. Good, we've got that. Let's peel off our backing. I love this tape, but once in a while you just get one piece that is absolutely going to put up a fight. So let's tape this together best we can. That looks good. We've got a nice meet all the way around. Now, we could use our groover, and I typically would, to mark for our chisel line, but this doesn't groove that well, and it's kind of a wide groove. So let's step back over to our wing divider. Now, I typically like my stitch line in about 1/8 of an inch, but this arm is going to drop pretty sharply off that edge. So let's go up to about a 3/16 of an inch, and let's just scribe in our line. And there we are, right to the end. That's more than enough to see. Very nice. Let's step over to our punch table, drop in our chisel line. Let's go with our 5mm diamond chisel. That's going to give us a pretty stitch line. Now, for those of us that are new, right here, I've got my marble. That's the center of our leather shop, and we use this on every project. This is our poly board. I want to make sure I chisel into our board and not our marble, so we don't trash our tools. But this can be very slick on the marble. Let's drop in a square piece of leather, just a scrap piece. Let's drop that in, and now that's not going to move at all. And on our mallet, my all-time favorite, this is our 11-ounce rawhide mallet, worth every penny. I've been using this since I started at Weaver almost 10 years ago, still going. All right, so let's start right here. Let's go with our 2-tine, since we're going to be working into a curve. So with my first tine, I'm going to sink that right into my scribe line, the intersection of my scribe line and my groove line. Now, one thing, we're going through about 1/8 of an inch leather here, so we need to keep our chisel as straight up and down as we can. So let's drop that right there. Good. Now, I want to make sure I get the full width of my chisel through that. That's going to make it easier when we sew. So let's easily draw that back out. Yeah, going through, not the issue. The problem is getting back out. So now I'm going to take my first tine, I'm going to put it in the last hole, and I'm going to drop that chisel right in that groove line. There we go. I can feel the tines. Good. Now, once we get out of this curve, we can jump up to our 4 or even our 6 and make some good time. But while we're in our corner, let's make sure we use our 2. Let's get a clean, consistent curve on our stitch lines. And there we are. We're coming out of our curve. We can jump up to our 4 tine. I might go with a 6. Again, we make good time with that. But again, the problem is not going through, it's trying to get 6 tines back out. So let's just stick with our 4. Yeah, good bit harder to get that back out, but I don't want to ream out the holes or stretch the leather. It's actually better, takes a little more time, but it's better to simply go with our 2 tine. But let's try our 4 again. Make sure we're through. Good, I'm going to do the same thing all the way around. Now, first tine, last hole. That gives us a perfect spacing. That's what I'm looking for. I don't want inconsistent stitch lengths, but that's a little bit slow. So what we can do, first time, last hole, let's just hit that hard enough to mark it. Good. There we go. So that'll speed the process up just a little bit. Good, we've got that. Now we're coming down to the end. We can always check to see where that last tine's going to land. Right there, it's almost perfect. I'm landing right in that groove line. But we can stretch or contract that if we need to. All I need to do, say we're a little bit long. I can mark that next hole, but then I can bring my chisel in just a hair. We're not going to see an inconsistency with that little of a difference. But right here, again, looks like we're coming in right on the nose. And there we are. And if we can get that out, yeah, those can absolutely stick, but it actually looks pretty good. Very nice. Let's go knock a stitch line into this. We're going to hand sew our project. Now I've got a Weaver 303 and a Weaver Cub. Both would work nicely, but for us leather crafters, if we don't have a machine, that's not going to stop us from putting in a pretty stitch line on our projects. So let's start with our trusty sewing pony. This is an absolute necessity. Now this is made to sit on. It's going to keep our work right in front of us, and it's going to keep the pony very stable. But I do about 80% of my leather work standing up. I've got better vision, more reach, and more upper body strength. So I'm going to clamp this onto my table. But my 2 best tricks on this, right here on the jaws. Let's glue some leather in here, just so we don't ding our project. But the best tip I can offer right here, let's keep a little piece of tape right there. When we get this locked in, let's tape that leather. Because if we don't, as we sew, our thread's going to grab that, release it, and our project's going to fall out of the claws. Well, once isn't an issue, but it's going to happen over and over, and that gets frustrating. All right, so on our thread and our needles, let's go with our John James number 18. This is a hand sewing needle. No sharp point on this. Our holes are already pre-punched. We're not going to stab ourselves every time we push a needle through the leather. And on our thread, let's go with the 0.8. This is the Ritza. Love this. We've got some beautiful colors in this. But let's go with our black. Well, first off, that's a nice contrast. But we're going to add a black edge coat. That's going to look good. And on our length, we're going to do a simple saddler stitch. So I'd like to go 4 times my length. Now, this is a nuance, but it's going to make perfect sense. So I'm right-handed. What I would like to do, let's put our top grain, or the edge we chiseled into, to our prominent hand. Because if we think about it, over here, our holes, they're funnel shaped. The needle is going to slide right into that. On this side, not so much the case. But what we'll do, let's flip this around. I'm going to pretend I'm left-handed so we can see what we're doing. So let's start right here. Let's take 1 needle. Now notice we've got a needle on both ends of our thread. So let's come in to our second hole, simply because there's going to be some stress right there. So let's pull that through, and now let's equal out the distance. And I'm so bad about that. Not paying attention. So if I don't get the distance even, what happens is as we sew along, 1 needle's out here, 1 needle's back here. Well, 4 times our length, we're going to waste a little thread. But that means if I do that, we still have enough thread when we get around to tie our knot. All right, so let's back up 1. So what I'd like to do with my prominent hand, let's bring that through, pull that taut, and then up. So with this needle, I'm going to come back through that same hole. Good. Now let's add a little bit of tension to that. Good. Now we're going to start sewing. So what I'd like to do, if I can get that needle, let's put our tape on our pony. Good. Let's go into that hole from our top grain first. Let's pull that needle through and up. Now that opens up that hole, so that second needle slides right through. And now let's give that some tension. I don't want to give it so much tension that it ripples, but I do want to see that thread sink down into that top grain just a little bit, okay? Next hole, again, I'm going to start from my prominent hand. I'm going to pull that through and up. There we are. Notice again, that opens that hole up. Let's bring that through, give that some tension. Now let's sew a couple of stitches, and you'll see why we're doing it this way. Now, I don't know how well we can see this, but with a flat chisel, we're going to put both needles through at the same time. It's going to be a pretty stitch line no matter what. But the reason we do it this way with our diamond chisel is because I want that nice little zigzag look. If we're not paying attention, two needles with the diamond, what's going to happen is we're going to have a zig up, zig down, maybe one even. It's going to look terribly inconsistent. But if we do this one needle at a time, it's going to be a beautiful stitch line. So what I'll do is I'm going to sew all the way around. Good, to the last hole on this side. We'll back up one hole, double stitch on both sides, then we'll tie our knot. Good, we're down to our last hole. Now this is going to be a little bit hard to see, but it's an easy concept. So on our last hole, just like we've done, let's come through from our top grain, but let's don't add a lot of tension here. Let's come through from the back. Good. Now let's come back with this needle. I'm going to come back to the second hole, and I'm just going to go through one ply, our top ply. Let's pull that through. I'm going to do the same thing on the back side. Yeah, there we are. Okay, and again, a little bit hard to see, but we're going to tie a square knot down in here. So let's take both pieces. Let's add our tension. Good. Now, I'm going to take right over left, circle around. We're making a square knot, and then let's place that down in there. Push our finger in and get that good and tight. Now, left over right. Let's circle around and do the same thing. Push our finger in, get that good and tight, okay? Now with our knife, let's pull that a little bit taut. Now I never used this part of my blade, so it's good and sharp. So I'm going to pull that thread across the blade instead of pushing the blade into the thread. That way I don't cut anything. Okay, well that actually looks pretty good. It's going to look a little bit better. We've got one more step to hand sewing. So let's step over to our punch table. Let's hammer down our stitch line. That's going to close up our holes, and it's going to spread our thread out a little bit, make it a little more prominent. Now, if we did a groove on this, it would also sink that thread down in the groove, reducing the risk of it snagging or grabbing. So we can absolutely use our mallet. But notice right here, that's where I hit everything, but I'm good right there. So if I want to use my mallet, I'm going to use that other side, or the side closest to me. But what I would prefer to do, let's go with a tack hammer. Now I say hammer down our stitch line. Really, we're going to tap this down. There we go. Now, it is a nuance, it's a small detail, but it certainly makes that stitch line look better. And there we go. That looks good. Front and back, nice stitch line. One more step and we're done here. We've got a pretty hand-sewn black stitch line and we've got a black skillet. Let's go with a black edge dye. This makes it so easy and it's going to look so good. Now we've got a bit of a craft fail. I've got to bring this up because right here, I should have dyed this before we sewed this together. Well, my bad, but if we're so inclined, we can always make a little shield. It's our pattern sheeting straight from our pattern. We can drop that in, easily dye that, but I'm going to leave it right where it is. This is going in my camp box. Now also too with our dye, Since we've got a top coat on both sides, if we get a little extra of the edge dye over, as long as we get back to that with a rag relatively quickly, we won't see that at all. So let's take our edge dye. Let's make sure we've got ample dye in the foam. And let's edge dye this. And just fill in where we need to. Good. Let's come back with our rag. Make sure we don't have any spilling over. Thus far, that looks good. Now let's just hit the outside edge on our tab. Well, that looks good. Very nice. Let's give our edge dye maybe half hour, 45 minutes dry time. We've given our skillet handle about 45 minutes. The edge dye feels dry, and that looks good. So this is probably going to be a little bit tight. We want that. With some use, it's going to loosen up, but I don't want it too loose on our skillet handle. Actually, that's almost perfect. My fingers are covered. Feels good in my hand. Nicely done. If we're looking for form and function, I think we nailed it on this one. This is beautiful. It's going to look good in our kitchen or at our campsite, and I hope every skillet handle cover you make is spot on beautiful. Good luck with your projects.